A while back, I made this video about my issues with the way that Tokusatsu has been handling anniversary content. I'll link it at the end of this video too if you're interested, but to summarize, it just doesn't feel special anymore. And it honestly has felt pretty empty since like Gokaiger. I'm sick of seeing old suits line up in a rock quarry if it means you're not going to bring back characters in a meaningful way. I'm also not interested in seeing the current team turn into or summon these old suits from out of nowhere, especially when you consider that it feels like we've been doing this every 3 years between the 3 different shows. But I do feel like this has kind of changed recently, and ironically enough, I feel like this idea started out in Donbrothers, which is another team that can inexplicably turn into previous Sentai suits, even though they'd only do it like 6 times. Which also begs the question, why even bother doing it at all? But they had Zenkai Black in the show. He also only transformed a few times, and the suit is this slight redesign of Zenkaiger from the last season. And they even brought back the actor from last year to portray him. I wouldn't say this is done to celebrate the show that literally wrapped up just last week. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the reason he's here is to explain Don Zenkaio, which kind of felt like this cobbled together last minute sort of thing to hold us over until Q2, because I think they needed more time to work on Don Oni Taijin. And rightfully so, because this is objectively one of the best mecha I own. But to get back on track, you can see this sort of outline here of bringing back a previous character and giving a new suit to a season that's already ended. This concept is expanded upon with King Kyoryu Red, who is a new suit for both the Kyoryugers and the King Ohgers that debuted during their crossover in episode 32 of King Ohger. Much like Zenkai Black, it exists in this almost liminal space between the two teams. I can't really classify it as belonging to either. And BoonBoomger also recently had a crossover episode with Go Ohger bringing back Go On Red for an episode, and as well as a few of the mecha. And I really like this style of celebrating the series. I think it kind of goes in line with this splurge of 10, 20, and even 30 years after specials we've been getting recently. I think narrowing down the focus to just one season makes callbacks feel more special. It is fun to celebrate the entire Super Sentai franchise, don't get me wrong. I'm really excited to see what they do with the 50th anniversary, which is only like 2 years away, by the way. But when celebrating the entire scope of what we have, specific teams and characters kind of get lost in the rough. To give you an idea, for example, I'll show you these Switch games. When you only have, let's say, 3, it's easy to admire each of them individually on one shelf. I don't have to think too hard about which game is getting attention for my afternoon play session because I'm only restricted to these 3 games. But now let's say you have this shelf. The 3 games are still there, but unless I specifically highlight them, they're not particularly noticeable when presented in this lineup. Hyper-focusing on just Kyoryuger, or just Go Ohger, or just Kakuranger is more exciting as a fan of these shows because now they get to soak up a lot more of the spotlight. Bringing back these characters for one more go-around is fun, and it leads to less anniversary burnout, because now the focus can change every year. Last year, I was excited to see the Kyoryugers, and now I'm gearing up for the Kakuranger special, which is huge for me because I never thought we would get one. I'm also having so much more fun speculating for like what we might have next year. Could we bring back the Shinkengers or maybe the Ninjers? Okay, but there's a really cool opportunity here with these 2 shows specifically lining up next year. Like, what if next year ends up being another Ninja Sentai? Or maybe a medieval Yokai Sentai or something cool and new, but the possibilities are really like endless for something like this because there's so many things you could do. It's so much more fun to speculate and get excited for what comes next when we limit our focus to just a few teams compared to just Sentai generic brand. Also, giving new power-ups to these retro suits is so dope. While I didn't watch Hurricaneger or Abaranger or Dekaranger as a kid, I still grew up with these suits, so it's cool to see them reimagined and to have like new things added in this style of these shows that I admire so deeply that I honestly thought we were just done with. Chiming in real quick, we're not done with the video yet, but feel free to like the video if you're enjoying yourself, and also ask a question for our 10K subscriber special. If I'm gonna do a Q&A video, I need a lot more questions, so feel free to do that. Obviously, I'm a big fan of this new concept of like in-between suits that we've touched on earlier too. The Tokyugers were rumored to also have a crossover with the BoonBoomgers this year, which comes from the same source that said they'd have one with the Goongers, so it's pretty likely. So now I'm trying to imagine like what a BoonBoomger Tokyuger hybrid might look like, assuming they introduce a crossover suit like King Kyoryu Red. What gets priority, the rails or the tires? Maybe both. Or maybe they'll follow the Zenkai Black concept and add another suit to the Tokyuger lineup. Maybe an indigo? To really make them Roy-G Biv? But you know how much more interesting this is to think about? Compared to the expectation of faceless suits just showing up out of nowhere. Maybe you get a cameo or two, but they don't spend much time with the new team. It was cool the first few times, like everyone collectively lost their breath seeing this shot during the lead up to Gokaiger, but doing it again and again and again, it's lost all sort of like flavor. Now I'm excited and actively trying to imagine what might come next, because you never know what season they might cherry pick to spotlight again. I think there is a time and a place to celebrate the entire series. I just feel like it's cool to pull things back a little bit and focus more on these individual teams for right now. Also, what's amazing about this is that before, when they used to transform into these old suits or summon them or be based on them in some type of way, a lot of current shows that do this, in my opinion, kind of feel like they have their identity sort of tied to the old shit. One of my issues with the Zenkaiger designs is that outside of Zenkaiser, there's not any Zenkaiger designs. The show doesn't feel like it has its own identity without being referential, which is okay because that's what they're going for. It's just not my taste. Now shows like King Ohger and BoonBoomger have a really strong sense of identity while finding time to have a special episode or two for these previous series that doesn't take away from their story and their, designs and these new concepts that they're trying to add. Here's a video from the beginning in case you wanted to see the progression of my opinions on this, and hopefully I'll see you next week.